Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks.
Today's episode takes us to Chilkoot Lake, just outside of Haines, Alaska. This area sits at the end of Chilkoot Bay, which reaches a little over 70 miles into the state from the sea, and is a destination on the Inside Passage tours. The area showcases stunning views of fjords, islands, and forested mountains that postcard photographers dream of. The mountains here are not very high in elevation, but are extremely rugged and steep. The tree species in this area is very diverse, with red cedar, fir, spruce, hemlock, and tamarack tree decorating the hills. Various species of willow, alder, and aspen round out the smaller trees in the area. Animals you might see include moose, mountain goats, sheep, and black and brown bears. On Saturday, February 6, 2021, 38-year-old Bart Pieciul and his friends Kraft and Jeff Moskowitz were almost ready to begin a remote backcountry ski trip down a course they had scouted out for a while now. The plan was for the men to hike up a certain point in the route and then ski back down through the challenging and untouched path they planned out. This practice is very dangerous due to the fact that there is no rescue team or medical team such as those at typical ski resorts. The men were on their own, and they knew it. The men did come prepared, though, sort of. They didn't bring bear spray, nor had they brought any firearms, bear bells, or any other form of bear deterrent, given bears were known to be hibernating at this point of the year. Even if they had brought bear spray, low temperatures are known to limit its effective range. They did bring a particularly important piece of technological equipment, a satellite communication device made by Garmin called InReach, which would relay their GPS coordinates just in case they might need it. They expected bears to be sleeping for a few more months, leaving the slopes and valleys to the skiers, or at least that was the plan. The three friends spent the better part of the day hiking up the mountain. As the three men hiked up the mountainside to about 1,600 feet in elevation, they unknowingly were approaching a denned-up sow brown bear and her little cubs about 12:30 p.m. The den was hidden amongst the duff and snow and nearly invisible to the men as they approached its opening. A little bit of information about bears in hibernation is in order to understand this episode more. As bears hibernate, they do not continue to sleep in an uninterrupted manner. They routinely wake up and move around their dens and change positions. They rarely emerge from their dens and are not truly hibernating in the strict sense. Experts call this state torpor and consider it to be similar to hibernation. They don't urinate or defecate very much while they are hibernating and don't eat or drink either. Experts explain that hibernation is an evolutionary adaptation which helps bears get through periods of the year when their food sources are low or unavailable. The facts surrounding why this mama bear wasn't sleeping blissfully while her little cubs nursed for a few more months aren't certain, but she was clearly disturbed by the men as they approached her den. It is a known phenomenon that bears in the southeast part of Alaska hibernate for shorter time frames due to more mild weather than areas farther north. As Bart crossed the hill just beside the den, the sow exploded from the snow covering the opening to her den and immediately knocked him down. She quickly swiped her claws toward his head as he flailed his arms toward her in an ineffective attempt to defend himself. As his arms were stretched toward the sow's face, she clamped her jaws onto his left arm and drove her teeth into his flesh, severely breaking his arm bones. She tossed her head back and forth and ripped tissue as she raked his head and right arm with her claws. Bart was terrified and quickly figured out that he had to play dead before she killed him. He rolled away from the bear and relaxed, allowing the steep terrain to work in his favor. His limp body tumbled down the slope and away from the angry sow and out of the vision of his friends. Kraft later stated that the attack on Bart lasted for the better part of a minute, and that the men could see a cub in the den. Bart's ski buddy, Kraft, looked on as his friend slid down the slope and watched as the sow immediately ran off. He could see Bart's slide trail through the snow, dotted with blood and broken ski poles. Bart's equipment was randomly scattered down the slope as he tumbled and provided an easy trail to guide Kraft and Moskowitz to his side. Moskowitz was fairly well prepared for an accident and began pulling out equipment from his backpack. He pulled out a thermal blanket, warm water, sleeping pad, some jackets, and a first aid kit. The two uninjured men began assessing Bart's condition. He was wet and cold as the temperature began to dip to around 15 degrees as the evening sun was near setting. He had visible puncture wounds from the sow's teeth and was bleeding from several places on his head, hands, and arms. Bart was in a lot of pain from the attack and likely from the fall. His friends were impressed with how he remained positive while they administered first aid to his injuries. As they took care of Bart, they used the satellite device to signal for a Coast Guard helicopter and sent their GPS coordinates and altitude they were located at. The first 30 minutes were very tense as they worried if Bart was going to live. He seemed to be drifting into shock. Bart's friends used a backpack frame to make a splint for his broken arm. They quickly wrapped him in as many layers they could pull over the splint they put on his injured arm. They laid next to him to try to keep him warm and comfortable as they told him stories to distract him and lift his spirits. After a short wait, the men heard the silence of the slopes broken by the sounds of a helicopter approaching their location. An MH-60 Jayhawk helicopter with a 5-person crew was dispatched from Sitka about 100 miles away, but arrived right on time. This crew routinely trained on retrieving people in need of rescue in steep terrain, so they knew exactly how to handle it. The skiers used bright-colored fabrics to signal the copter, which made finding them much easier for the helicopter crew. They watched as the rescue party hefted a tethered litter out the side and lowered it on a cable along with a medic and a rescue swimmer, who was sent to evaluate Bart's condition. The rescue team loaded Bart into the litter and began lifting him from the precarious location and on board the copter. Kraft and Moskowitz made their way down the hill on their own as the Coast Guard helicopter flew Bart to Juneau, where his most severe injuries were immediately treated. Surgeons placed pins in his left arm to hold his bones together so they could mend. A second surgery would be required later to remove the pins after healing. Regarding the sow and what happened with her and her cubs, the authorities did not pursue her considering the men approached her cubs and her den. They viewed this attack as a defensive attack, and she did not try to cash Bart at any point, and immediately left the area. There is no source I could find indicating if she returned to recover her cubs or simply returned to the den. I can imagine that the stress from the event and the clatter created by the helicopter as it recovered Bart and his friends, that she may have been frightened from the location of her den. The fate of her cubs is unknown. While his friend was convalescing in the hospital, Kraft established a GoFundMe account and raised $32,000 to help his family offset the medical bills. Bart didn't have insurance, so this was a big help for him. In 2019, a study on bear attacks in Alaska noted that 10 people died from bear attacks between the years 2000 and 2017. There were 68 people hospitalized for injuries during 66 bear attacks in the same time period in Alaska alone. A peculiarity in the data showed that the attacks seemed to happen in spurts, with a few people being attacked or killed, and then a period of years passing without a fatality. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I am left with a few questions for you. Why do you think this sow was not hibernating at this time of year? Do you think firearms or bear spray could have prevented this attack? Do you think Bart got off easy with his limited injuries? How do you think her cubs fared? I will be glad to read your comments, so post them in the comments section below and let's talk about it.